Good morning. I'm David Pollack of the Community Security Initiative and the Jewish Community Relations Council. Today, we're going to have another episode of our ongoing series of Consultants Corner with Dov Horowitz and Ilya Umansky, two incredible consultants to the Community Security Initiative. And take it away, Dov.
Thank you, David. Good morning, everybody. This is our third segment of this year. Last week, we took a little detour about applying for the upcoming grants. But again, for those of you joining and those of you familiar, this webinar is specifically about how to use the grant funds that you were awarded. So this is post-award. You either got one of the existing grants out there, either this recent year or maybe even a little while ago. But we'll step by step every other week. We'll be here to continue moving forward. So before we jump in, those of you familiar with anything that JCRC does, recognize, we're an unaffiliated nonprofit. We can't refer, whether it's vendors, we don't have all the exact answers. What we do is provide guidance and consultation based on our experience, based on how we know it works, our relationships with the agencies, having been through hundreds and hundreds of these grants. That's how we provide our information. So the next slide, in short, it really just means this disclaimer that we don't speak for the agencies. We'll say this every week. Ask your reps, make sure you know who your reps are, whether it's at DHSES or DCJS. Obviously, we're going to be using some acronyms. If you attended the first session 4 weeks ago in November, we went through a lot of what the acronyms are if you're new to these grant processes so that we can keep jumping in and building on it week to week. On that note, I'll do a short recap on the next slide, where we were in regards to the latest Securing Community Against Hate Crimes grant. This is a grant administered by DCJS. This is the last award that was given, was the first time DCJS did the award. But please note, they're building up their team. They're learning our communities, these grant processes, which many of us are familiar with from the past DHSES grants. So note, even you should have received a letter like this. This is what we went through a couple weeks ago. If you are interested in that grant, if you had received that grant, make sure to go watch that webinar. We can't rebuild through it all again, but just real quickly, you should have received a letter that looked like this. You should have got it from a rep within DCJS, and you should reach out to your rep. Hey, what's next? Because these are technically a 2-year grant period, and it takes a lot of time to get through. That's what we went through a few weeks ago. The amount of time these grants really take from start to finish, easily a year to year and a half, and that's when it's smooth. It doesn't mean it's a heavy week every time, but you got to move step by step. So reach out to your rep, say, what's next for us? They're likely going to tell you one of the main things is their MWBE requirements, minority and women-owned business enterprise requirements. Any state grant requires 30%. And we learned, as we'll see on the next slide, that they'll accept an answer that says to be determined. Because unfortunately, if you're familiar, if you've been through a grant process before, or if it's a new one for you, which we'll get through in future weeks, there are many advertisement and procurement requirements and bids. How do we select our MWBE vendor if we haven't gone through the procurement process? So these are the forms they're going to ask you to fill out, and we provided these examples a few weeks ago. We're not going to go into it in depth here. Actually, you'll see that today's segment is actually going to be specifically related to the federal nonprofit security grant program. So next slide real quick. So a few weeks ago, we started describing how JCRC, the CSI, our team, kind of breaks down the federal grant process as well as the state hate crimes grant process. They're similar overall. Today's focus is going to be on the NSGP, but we started showing the phases, right? So you probably recognize this phase one. This is our terminology. If you said phase one to your DHSES rep, they will not know what you're talking about. It's for us to give it to you in chewable bites so we can move along the process. But a few weeks ago, we didn't show the whole flow, and we're still not going to show the whole flow because we want to move through it step by step, not get too far ahead of ourselves with information we're not going to remember and have to get back to anyways. But the number one thing, if you receive the latest NSGP, right? So the rest of today's session is going to be on the NSGP. Your first thing really to do is execute your contract, sign your contract in eGrants. Your rep should have been in touch with you from DHSES. That's the New York State Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Services. They are your state administrative agency for this federal grant. They should have reached out to you, told you what other documents you need to provide, how to sign, how to execute your contract within your eGrants portal. And that's really kind of what you should be focusing on right now. But you should also be, next slide, start developing your EHP. And that's what we're going to be really talking about today. Now, as you see, there's a hard stop. When the state has asked you to submit your EHP, I believe January 6th or so. Obviously, you should be working on it right now. We're going to go through it today, what that means, using a lot of their sources to interpret it and explain to you what is required. You need to remember that you cannot move forward until your EHP is approved. So even if you submit your EHP by the deadline, it still could take a few weeks, especially when there's hundreds and hundreds of grants, that it could take a few months to get back to you. Till that happens, you can't be in touch with vendors. You can't be installing stuff. I literally over the weekend heard a story out of a location from Ohio that they went through, they contracted, they found a vendor, submitted for reimbursement, no reimbursement, hard stop. They did not do their EHP. Whether or not their state was as robust as New York State is in ensuring there's information for everybody, I don't know if that state told them, but it is in your contract that when you apply that you're going to have to do this kind of information. So on that note, I am going to turn it over to Ilya to walk you through the EHP requirements and what this all means and how to get the best out of it. So thank you.
Now that Dov got us this far through the process, and we're now at the EHP, which translates as Environmental and Historic Preservation Package, you will see that there are two QR codes. You can point your camera at each one of the codes. One opens the EHP resource site that is run by FEMA. Another one opens the blank form, the blank EHP screening form that if you haven't done so already, you can download and begin filling out. And we'll go through the key points of that form, and also several steps that are entailed in terms of preparing your EHP package. Now, just to set things off correctly, it's probably is important to some of you to just understand where all of this is coming from. What is EHP, right? It comes slightly out of the left field. It's not necessarily, or at least terminology that's being used, environmental and historic preservation. It's not really coming from the security arena, but it is very much related. And so the way the government wants to receive your documentation is related to the fact that majority of your facilities are part of the environmental and historic preservation. So any such projects that are undertaken, be it security or renovation or whatever, when they are covered by grants, they need to go through this environmental and historic preservation process so that it's recorded on the government side that you have undertaken the steps to make sure that you've supplied sufficient information. That information obviously will include, as I will demonstrate to you later, security related stuff. But in order to make the bureaucratic side of the process complete, you will see that this is a fairly old policy, fairly old set of laws that speak to environmental and historic preservation. And there are several of these bullets that discuss here what types of preservation is being addressed by these laws. Moving right along. So what is needed for the EHP process? Right. The first thing, obviously, is the EHP screening form. We'll guide you through a couple of key points on it. Obviously, and I would say, unfortunately, these forms could be a bit tedious to fill out. However, it's part of the process, and you can seek assistance from either the CSI team or your grant rep, and make sure that if you don't understand certain points of the process and how you're filling out the form, you can always go back and ask a question. So some of the points that you'll see have been actually put together by the Homeland Security and Emergency Services Department with the New York State to guide you through some of the pages here. So just to recap here, what is needed for the EHP? The screening form, as you can see, labeled color ground level photos of the project site, and we'll give you some examples of that. Color photographs of where the equipment will be installed, and this is where we're moving past the historic preservation or environmental preservation. We're demonstrating where at your site, on your building, you're planning to implement various types of security, right? Aerial photographs would be necessary to demonstrate the extent of your site, because not always do you just deal with the building. In many settings, you're also dealing with external grounds of your facility, of your site. And let's say, for example, you need to implement a fence, you'd need to demonstrate that on a site photo. And again, here, your building is over 45 years old. Color, ground level photographs of each exterior side of the building. The reason for that is, again, that's where we go back to the this old and still working law and set of requirements for historic preservation. So as we begin the form, and this is where notations here in red are provided, and they have been developed by the representatives from the grant administration body with the Homeland Security Emergency Services of New York State. This is how they're guiding you to provide information in the form, right? So please take note, and obviously, because this is recorded, you can go back to this. Take note of where you need to provide your information. Some of the points, as they very carefully disclose to you here in highlighted red text, indicate that some of the information will have been pre-filled, right? So, and that information, if you receive the form from the government, cannot be altered or should not be altered or changed, right? So where information needs to be provided by yourselves it starts at the subgrantee line, and it goes down to the rest of the form. Okay, so as far as the project type, again, the team on the government side is advising everyone to tick boxes 1 and 3. Okay, because again, for formality's sake, these two boxes need to be checked in order to submit the forms and to not receive another email saying you didn't submit them correctly. Okay, this is simply, again, to ensure that the forms are completed properly. Okay? So please note also that you have the section 1 here for purchase of equipment. We've seen, unfortunately, that different sections here have been marked. Again, you're getting guidance directly from the government, letting you know that by specifying the equipment to be purchased and the quantity of each, right? And that goes into section 1. And then in section 3, you will have to make sure that you've marked it again for formality's sake in order to skip to the following section, right? And that's after having marked the previous box, you're being guided to insert information through section D with the project details, right? And please also see the notations here. Very importantly, all parts of section D must be completed. Sometimes we get questions, well, I've submitted everything, I don't understand why I'm not allowed to proceed. And the actual answer is in the way the documentation has been submitted. Sometimes it's missing the crucial details, and please make sure that you don't miss that. And again, if you're unsure, your grant rep will be able to give you that guidance. It does get a little bit more tedious here, but please make sure to follow the guidance of the form. So I'll just read through a couple of notations here because they're quite small. Forgive me. It's just a matter of how the image here renders. Answering all the questions in this section is very important. Ground disturbance has the potential to disturb architectural resources. Hence, a description of the length, depth, and width and disturbance is of particular interest to EHP reviewers. This is not a security related item. However, what is being asked is to make sure that you can justify what type of project you're doing in relation to environmental preservation. So you'll have to provide some additional information, even though it's not security related, but please follow the form here. And They're also referring in section D2 in the middle, past the middle of the page, to refer to Appendix A, right? EHP instructional assistance for nonprofits for more information. So on the FEMA website, there are additional resources and guides that can help you get additional information in order to fill out this form. As we move forward, please note that section the section past the midpoint here is not applicable to your projects, right? So, but section 3 at the top of it of this page is applicable. So it relates to site photographs, maps, and drawings. The way you will be submitting these photographs we'll touch on a bit later, because there's actually specific guidance for that. But please make sure that you follow these directions, and it's definitely very, very useful. We found it to be quite useful, not only for submission to the grant reviewers or the HP reviewers, sorry, but also for the facilities themselves to labeled photographs, so that later on you can come back and easily guide either contractors or the rest of the members of your team as far as the photos for your facility, specific to the locations of where the photo is taken, what it depicts, but also if you're adding notations for security devices, it's easier for contractors and for other members of the team to later on review what your project parameters are. So again, this gets a little bit more complicated in terms of how you take photographs, right? So please take a look at the minimum requirements for these photographs. Once again, the reason why we feel this would be useful for you is that even if you're not able to take a screenshot of this page, this will be recorded, and you can easily go back to this and stop the video and just follow these directions in greater detail as you begin to fill out your screening form and prepare your package. From what I've seen in my experience, I really haven't seen EHP packages being declined because, let's say, a photo was taken with a mobile phone. It really it works quite fine. So I know a few people have asked us, in the last couple of years, do we use professional cameras? Do we need any specialized equipment? The answer is no. So you can simply use your mobile phone, just as long as it has decent resolution, and modern phones accommodate that quite well. Should not be an issue. And obviously, how you would provide your photos, there are best practices that are listed here. And again, this guidance, you can go back to it to review at your convenience as you are preparing the EHP package. So what I mentioned before, there are some basically technical guides for how you would, what kind of applications you can use on your devices. I want to point out that we clearly understand that everyone's technical capabilities of how to use laptops or PCs, all sorts of technology to get photos organized or different applications that are used. These capabilities are different. Okay, some of us may know what Photoshop is, or and have that software, or we may not. This is where you might need to make a decision of either asking a person who's fairly competent in using and organizing photographs on a computer. What I found works quite well is using PowerPoint, and then bringing photos there on slides, and then organizing them to your liking, and then converting that file into PDF. This is what I've seen being used quite often. But there are also notation capabilities and arrows and text boxes available in PowerPoint. This is something that I've seen being used with clarity and good success. This is the guidance from Dishes to alert you to how to take photographs and then annotate those photographs. Okay, please just take a look here, and hopefully you'll be reassured that nobody is asking for any very detailed technical annotations. You're simply taking your project parameters and you're annotating a photo of both what your site looks like and also where you want certain types of equipment. So where you're placing equipment, you're adding annotations in that way, and also what kind of equipment you're placing at different points of your facility, right? And I know that there will be some questions as far as well, because we've heard it not long before this webinar today. Some folks ask a question, well, how do I even understand what kind of equipment I need and so on, and how do I describe it properly? We understand that not everybody is knowledgeable about technical terminology as far as, for example, if you could say video camera, but do you need to say more to describe what kind of video camera you need? If questions like that arise, either the CSI team is happy to help you, or you can ask for guidance from the grant rep. There is one notation that I'll mention, I'll repeat a bit later, is that they're also not security practitioners. So the more, like if you keep your annotations at a simple kind of just normal non-technical language level, that probably will work fine. These are some examples of how previous packages have been submitted. So large-scale photos of the overall facade of your facility are always welcome, and obviously all photos need to be in color. How each photo then is annotated as far as the address, the name of the organization, right? Please note that, right? And again, Dishes does ask to label all of the photos as part of the EHP package. And as you can see on the right photo, there is a label that says camera. It doesn't really get into many technical details about it. It simply says the location of the camera and an approximate position. It will be placed by rear sanctuary exit door, and there's an arrow indicating where that device approximately will be placed. Now, we've also heard questions like, is that the exact location? Am I going to be, is my EHP going to be declined or my project declined if the location changes slightly? The answer is simply no. These locations are approximate, and in many implementation projects, things need to be adjusted. So the location of the device often gets moved by, let's say, half a meter or a meter. These things really are part of the normal project. A few other examples, and I mentioned to you about aerial photos, also mentioned to you about how to label individual photos as far as, let's say, doors are concerned, and what kind of action is required for a door, right? So for example, on the photo on the left, you'll see that it's labeled as far as the name of the organization, the address, but then you also state what is it that you're doing with this door, okay? On the photo on the right, you'll see an aerial photo, and that depicts where you're proposing certain either fencing solutions, or if you're thinking about adding vehicle barriers around your buildings at the site, right? So those things get marked on an aerial photo. There are a couple of dates. Dov, please correct me if I'm wrong here, but we're still talking about January 6th. This is content directly taken from the Dishes. Is that date still correct?
Yeah, correct. That's their request. Obviously, that's what they want everyone to submit it so it doesn't delay the rest of their grant implementation.
Yep.
But and they'll work with you. Know your rep, submit it, ask them your questions. They might go back and forth with you, but that's their goal. I don't think they won't cancel your grant because of it, but that is definitely the goal, to get these EHPs for the latest round in.
Sure. One of the motives for us to put a lot of this information together, present it to you in a live setting, but also then have it recorded, is that you can always go back to this. We understand perfectly well that some of this information might be very dense, and you are so busy doing many other things other than security at your facilities that we understand that retaining and remembering everything we present may be challenging. So the reason why we record all of these is so you can go back to these discussions, to these presentations, and just stop yourself at a point that's necessary to you when you're completing the EHP, and just read through everything that is described on a slide like this. For a presentation, it is quite a dense text, okay? But hopefully, when the time comes for you, or if you're already in the middle of preparing your EHP, this would be useful material for you. And if you're unsure about anything, or about something, sorry, please coordinate with your rep, or if there are some ways in which CSI team can help you, please do send us an email. We always add the email address at the bottom of each slide. I've taken you through fairly quickly through the screening form. That's just one of the few documents that you need to put together. Remember that not only do you have to get the screening form done, you also have to put together the set of color photographs that kind of are sequenced in a way that you want to develop your project. I'm going to share with you what often we see dishes and other government organizations that they miss when they inform their constituency regarding preparation of EHP. One thing I said before, and it's worth noting, is that grant administrators are not in a position to offer security advice, okay? Because unfortunately, their roles are more bureaucratic in nature, and their background probably is not security related. Even though they work for the government, they work in more bureaucratic roles. So they won't be able to provide much commentary, if any commentary at all, regarding security. So if questions arise related to security, if you're having trouble interpreting, let's say, your threat and vulnerability assessment reports, any other advice that you may have received, or your decisions about developing your security projects, the CSI team is available to you for additional advice. Here's where we see some inconsistencies when EHP packages are prepared and sent out. Even though maybe the grant rep may not pick up on these things, but later on, when you're dealing with the implementation, it becomes quite obvious that maybe the team didn't actually reach agreement in terms of what security is needed, how it needs to be planned out and distributed around the site and the building, right? And what associated hardware and technology is required. And again, sometimes people think just in terms of, okay, devices that are visible, but what is often missed is all the cabling, it's all the security rooms where the signal equipment needs to be located. So that's another bit of thinking that needs to be done before your EHP is put together. Now, I'm not suggesting that you demonstrate cable runs. That's too much information. Obviously, what you're showing on your photos, the annotated photos, is only information about visible technology or hardware that you need in order to increase security of your facility. That's the extent. However, when you as you make these decisions before you complete your package, please spend a little bit of time planning out your security, where you want devices, what features do you want, what kind of performance are you expecting, right? I know I'm saying things that are not part of your daily vocabulary. You probably don't deal with security on a daily basis. This is where the CSI team can be useful. And if you're working with an external consultant, this is the time to ask them for advice. Another thing that we notice is that often facilities are being a bit unrealistic in terms of loading up their project with too many moving parts. Okay. Now, we always advocate for having a diversified security upgrade. So not only do you need to pour all of your funding from the grant into a single solution, for example, window film, right? We suggest to focus sometimes on your perimeter entrances, meaning making sure that your door hardware, locking are sturdy enough, right? And then also perhaps allocating some funding for additional upgrades like video surveillance, like access control, communication, and so on, right? But please also think about how realistic is it that you can actually complete the project, okay? And where should you be allocating your resources? And another point here, your perimeter protection should be first priority, right? It's nice to have bells and whistles and technology, but how are you protecting your perimeter openings, meaning windows and doors, right? And for a lot of facilities, and I know that JCRC has presented on this before. For a lot of facilities, the actual point of protection, even during incidents, came from simply a locked door. That created enough of a deterrent and a delay for an attacker. So please, as you consider this together with your teams, please pay attention to this one important suggestion. Now, as I said before, what's worked, and I've seen this work, I've put documents similar to this together, is using PowerPoint and then converting that PowerPoint to a PDF. So then you can send the file over. Now, if what I said does not resonate with you, you've never done this, please find somebody who knows how to use PowerPoint and then convert to PDF. That is likely the person who can put all of this together for you. Okay, PowerPoint is not a difficult application, but I realize that for some of us, maybe we don't have experience with that. If you can find another way of doing it, people have used Microsoft Word, even though working with photos in Microsoft Word is a little bit more challenging as far as alignment, as far as annotations are concerned. But we give you a couple of alternatives here. If any questions arise, I think that you should ask some folks on your team internally to see who's computer savvy and can help you get it done. Okay. Another thing that we recommend, and this is something that goes beyond how Dishes advises you on preparing the EHP, is the way you sequence your photos. Okay, imagine you're giving me a tour. Imagine you're taking me throughout your facility. It is fairly likely that upon arrival, you'll probably just show me around the building, right? And that at least we'll stay before we enter the building. You'll show me the exterior area. And then you'll take me through the foyer to the next functional area, and then to possibly the more internal functional areas. We would like you to think about sequencing your photos and your annotations and your device placements in that order. So from outside going in, as if you're giving somebody a tour. Okay, so that way you can demonstrate some continuity of movement through your site and your building, and then you're also kind of demonstrating to someone who's completely unfamiliar with what your building looks like, kind of the starting point. Where is the your property line, right? And then how do you move inward toward your building, and then within your building. Another thing, as I said, that often is outside of any discussions for facility teams is the planning for where the monitoring will happen. So who's going to watch the cameras, for example, and where that station should be. Or for intercoms, right? If somebody is buzzing from the outside door intercom, and somebody needs to release a door using an intercom-based station and watch the video of a person who's ringing, right? Where should that be located? Where should that station be inside the building, right? So, in some cases, if there's a formal reception area, that's great. But in some cases, you probably might need to offer it to one of the administrators inside the building or volunteer. But somebody needs to monitor those devices and then help facilitate access, right? And another thing that gets missed is, where are you placing, for example, a video recorder? Now, it's not going to sit together with the camera under the canopy of your building outside, right? Obviously. So you're going to be running a cable to somewhere inside your building. Where is that room? The reason why we say that is, imagine, I suppose many of you are familiar with how your IT equipment is set up, right? So you might have a computer workstation, but it has a network set of connections that run to somewhere with a switch and a server, right? And so where is that switch and server? Where is that equipment located? The same concept applies to security signal devices. They need to be located in either an IT room or an isolated security room, or another room that has sufficient space to accommodate that equipment. You might need professional advice to understand how much of that equipment will be placed in the room, what real estate it will take up. right? I can tell you that a simple security wall field, meaning equipment that's placed on a wall, that's mounted to the wall, is typically at least 4 feet by 4 feet. Okay, so that's just equipment that goes on the wall. And sometimes, often, you have equipment that is placed inside a rack, meaning an IT rack. That's a separate enclosure that is freestanding on the floor, or sometimes mounted to the wall, and that occupies even more space, right? So space planning for your equipment is also as important as planning out your devices that are visible to visitors around your facility. Last but not least, as we always say, and as we conclude these presentations, it's very important that you don't feel like all of this is dumped on your shoulders and that you have to persevere through all of this completely being isolated in vacuum, right? This is why JCRC started the CSI program. This is why you have a team of regional reps that can offer additional guidance to you. Not only are they very experienced in terms of working with different facilities, but they may have done similar things for their own facilities as well, where they're members. They've gone through different sorts of processes in getting the EHPs together or advising others on how to do it, right? And of course, the CSI team is built of those people who understand much better how security works, how security technology is planned, how it needs to be distributed around facilities. The main point here is please don't forget to reach out. The email is right at the bottom of the screen here. And at the end of the presentation, we'll also show you all of the CSI team members and their contact information. Now, I will also plant a seed with all of you. And we'll give this is also an important slide, but that's going to be important as you begin transitioning from, let's say, EHP preparation to dealing and selecting contractors. So I'm kind of throwing a hook there for the coming couple of weeks as we discuss EHP further. This one sheet of content, right, can actually help align your further bid management. It sets out general requirements for contractors. And those requirements are taken from professional security specifications so that they hold contractors more accountable and also make them provide information to you in a more consistent format so that it's easier for you to assess what kind of bids, what kind of information they're providing to you, and how to make your decisions. We've seen such a wide gamut of documents being thrown at people who are managing bids for individual facilities. In some cases, it's just, we'll give you video surveillance, it's going to cost you $25,000. That's literally the information that a bidder offers to a client. Is that enough? Of course not. And so we are trying to enable every one of you to understand, okay, I can actually provide to contractors general description of my facility. Here's what it is. Here are the functional spaces that I'm dealing with. Here is the general security scope. Okay, here are my contact details. All of that information is on the left-hand side of this page. And then on the right-hand side, general requirements for contractors. You need to hold them far more accountable than what we currently see in order for them to deliver good quality work to you. Okay, and some of the points here, just to again emphasize, we've said multiple times before, one of the things is compliance with US laws. Some equipment, as you know, has been banned by the US government. We see a lot of facilities today using that equipment, and they don't even realize that if they choose to upgrade that equipment to, let's say, expand the number of devices, that is not going to be covered by the grant because that equipment is in violation of US law. And so it's banned by the US government. This is something you need to tell contractors, because even a couple of weeks ago, I was dealing with one contractor who knew that they were suggesting equipment that was banned by the US government, and they still provided a bid using that equipment. And then when we challenged them on that, they said, wait a second, oh, so you wanted the equipment that's not banned? And we said to them, don't you understand that the facility will not receive a reimbursement if they buy equipment from you that's not approved by the US government? So those things you could save yourself time to look at and to as you begin to deal with contractors. Again, just planting a seed. You can go back to this. It's not something that's urgently necessary for your EHP, but something that you should begin to understand and review and add to your bid packages. Because EHP, as we've come to realize, is actually quite useful as part of the bid package. That is what helps contractors understand where you want your devices to be placed and what kind of security you want around your facility. With that, I know that we're a little bit short on time. Let me summarize. Please follow the EHP guidance from the state. We've given you some annotated screening form pages. We've also given you some guidance on how to take photographs, what they should look like, the fact that you don't need to use specialized camera equipment to take them, and how to annotate them using simple language. Maintain contact with your grant rep. Even though sometimes they're difficult to reach, and even though they may not be the security practitioners that you're thinking they are, they still will guide you through the bureaucracy. That's probably the best value that they can offer to you. The other thing is reach out to CSI if you need additional guidance that is security specific. If something seems strange and you're not sure whether this would work, or if you're struggling to understand how to pick security controls, that's where CSI comes in. It could be very useful to you and save you a lot of time and headaches. And of course, we will continue this on January 3rd. We'll get into further stages of EHP and how it's submitted and how to vet and then select contractors. So all of that will be available. I'll finish my side with the final slide as promised, where you will find all of the contact information for your regional CSI reps, so that you can be in touch with them directly. I will stop here. I know that we have some questions. The chat is full of questions. I'll pass it back to you, Dov, and then we'll take some questions.
Gotcha.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Ilya. We know that's a lot of dense and new information, but I think, first of all, everyone realized that what we at CSI do and what Ilya did was we take the information that exists. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel and kind of interpret it and digest it for you. Actually, I just looked at DHSES's website today, and they actually posted their slides from a few weeks ago when they did their state presentation, which included their EHP stuff. So you'll see a lot of similar information, but what we do is Ilya dives in a little deeper. He explains a little more than just reading over slides, and especially the additional slides we provided. Again, like Ilya mentioned, we'll get back to this in a few weeks, and we'll go a little deeper, and maybe provide some real examples. So just before we get into the questions, which will be led by Terry, our Regional Security Regional Security Director for Manhattan. Also, thank you to Seth, the Regional Security Director for Queens, who kind of runs the show from behind the scenes and makes sure we're all flowing. If you have some more questions on EHP and you're rushing to get to the finish line, please also recognize that our webinars from last year are posted on our Consultants Corner website. So please make sure you read through those. It's very, very similar, except for some of the fill-ins. But your rep should have provided you the link to the right documents or the documents you can use. There's our information. These webinars will be posted in a couple days. And with that, we'll turn it over to Terry. One last thing about the chat. For those of you who have participated before, post your questions here. Most of it is what's covered in the webinar, but we want to make sure we get to all your answers. We try not to answer anything in the chat just because there's so many variables and so many nuances, and everyone has some specific question. To give a blanket statement sometimes can be misleading. So with that, I will turn it over to Terry.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today on this happy Hanukkah to everyone. We'll dive right into this. Let me just point out, Dov mentioned that both the slide deck and this presentation will be made available in a couple of days on our website. I posted the website within the chat, and that includes page 24, which I know, which was very dense with information, but that particular slide will be made available to you. You can look at it at your leisure. Since I'm going to cheat, since I'm in this position, and I'm going to ask a question first, because this has come up before and it didn't really come up today. Dov, can you explain or get into just a little more detail about the difference between a grant and a grantee and a sub-grantee, excuse me.
Gotcha. Okay, a little outside the world of actual EHP stuff. So technically, the EHP, right, what we talked about today, is a requirement for your federal grant. The NSGP is a federal grant. The Nonprofit Security Grant Program is a federal grant from FEMA. But what they do is they pass it off to the state agencies to administer the grants. Those state agencies are the actual grantee, and we, all us with the recipients of the awards, are the sub-recipients. So kind of the state's almost like a pass-through. Technically, they're the grantees. They packaged up and they submitted their application of hundreds of locations. FEMA said, okay, here's how it's awarded and individually broken out for each applicant, like you on the webinar today. And that's really it. We're really the sub-grantees.
Yeah, I guess that's why they filled in those boxes ahead of time to make sure that the person who thinks they're the grant recipient, which they are going to fill out that box that says grantee, but no, you're the sub-grantee. So just keep that in mind so you don't get confused on these forms.
And I'll give a caveat. That's why all the CSI team members, Ilya, myself, keep reiterating, work with your rep, because the reps themselves are grantees. They need to make sure the rules are followed. So the only way they can make sure their requirements are followed is by making sure you follow your requirements as it goes up the ladder almost.
All right, speaking about forms, this is another inevitable question. I can't fit it in the box they gave me. What do you do?
Well, real quickly, and Ilya's definitely worked with many of these, so we can provide any additional guidance. It says right in the EHP documentation that whether you see it in the webinar slides or you actually have the information, that you can provide an additional text box. It says this is an allowable thing to do, so you fill out as much as you can. You say see attached for more information. You provide an additional document there.
All right, so it's okay to attach separate sheets for any one of those dialog boxes.
Yeah, if you look through the EHP documentation, it says specifically you can do that.
Roger that. All right, we'll switch gears a minute. This is a more technical question. So, Ilya, how are you supposed to know about depths, et cetera, for fencing posts if you don't have any plans for installation yet? How are you supposed to figure out this technical things that they seem to be asking people?
Okay, cool. So I've not seen EHPs that go into that level of detail where they have to indicate what is the distance between the fence posts or the depths. Typically, what I see is simply an indication of where you want your fence line to be. Okay, and so the rest of the technical details are done after the EHP has been approved, because that is when you get into project implementation and the actual specific device and its placement and hardware in its placement and the sizing, the heights, all of those things get more worked out. Now, there could be some additional questions for you if you have a special historic site or environment, special status over environmental protection site, and so there could be additional requirements. As far as my experience is concerned, I have not seen those specific questions raised, although again, by just simply simply because I know that in separate projects where historic preservation was involved, even the mounting heights and the size of devices was questioned. This hasn't been, unfortunately, my experience with a bunch of EHPs that I've seen go out from the clients that I've worked with.
Thank you, Ilya. Go ahead, Doug. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no problem. Real quickly, right, Ilya hit it on the head. If you do actually have a historical building or in a landmark district, they're going to ask for more details. It could also depend on your rep. Some reps want a lot more details than others, and there's no way to really define how that will work out. But there's another side to this. As much as we'd love to be detailed, if you are too specific on the EHP side, when you submit this, that becomes what you're approved for by FEMA. So then if you go back and do need to make a change because that camera can't be actually installed right there because of the material behind the wall or other limitations, it's actually gonna be a little bit harder to go back and get that reimbursement. So it's better, like Ilya's been advising, to keep it a little bit more general. You can see that's the pictures that DHS provided as well, DHSES provided as well. What's the goal here? The general, the more specific you go, the more you're going to be cornered into that exact installation. So, if you say, I'm installing this type of door exactly here, that's going to look exactly like this, and then your vendor comes back to you, well, that kind of door costs this much, and you only have a budget of so much, upgrading this door, bam, this arrow, right? Upgrading to security door. And keep it like that. And then from there, you get your bids, and you get into the details of exactly how you want it to be.
Now, I'll add here too, is that Dov is absolutely correct. We don't want you to lock yourselves in. However, if ever there is a concern, let's say, you're being asked too many very technical questions and so on, this is a good time to stop and have a conversation with your grant rep and say, listen, we cannot be so specific, because only when you start getting involved with the contractors and giving them the requirements of your project, then it needs to be further designed. And so we're not required to provide designs of all of our security measures. We're simply saying, here is where we want things to be located. Okay, here is the general fence line, here is the general deployment of video surveillance, here's where we want the intercom, but it's up to the contractor, and if there is budget available, a consultant to actually do the technical design. Again, please have that conversation with your rep if you get into these more technical situations. And obviously, if CSI can be of use to you, you want to just reach out to us and see, get some clarification or from our side, we'll be happy to offer our thoughts.
Great dialogue, guys. I know we're pushing up against 11 o'clock here, so we'll try to get at least one more question. And Dov, you can tell me when to stop. Talk about photos for a minute. Do you need to submit a photo for every door and camera you plan to install or replace? And with that said, how would you know exactly where to put everything if you haven't had a contractor in yet to say, put a camera here, put a camera there? Can you get into that a little bit?
Right. So you certainly have to demonstrate every location where you want security upgrades. And again, that's why we shared with you that you should be fairly general about the devices you want and stuff like that. You don't need to say more than just, here's where I want a camera, here's where I want a motion sensor. Now, the choice of locations is sometimes challenging, because yes, you could be you may not even understand that a camera, if placed in that specific location, is not going to give you the right type of coverage, or it's going to be in a dark spot and the lighting in your facility will not support operation of that camera, right? This is where we at the CSI can help you. If you have access to an independent consultant, they can help you as well. In general, if you cannot get any help, let's say there's no help whatsoever that's available to you, general rule is just demonstrate what is it that you want in each location. Place it in the area of where you took the photo. That I would like my video surveillance to be, to show, to view a specific area, right? So that should be enough of a guide to even someone who doesn't understand security. I want my alarm system to have, let's say, motion sensors. Fine. So you typically, if you think even about your private residence, your motion sensors, your window sensors are placed at the areas where perimeter could be breached, right? So it could be near a window, near a door, and so on, right? So you basically follow those same principles. Now, again, just to stress, it's not likely that all of those devices will end up in exactly those locations that you indicate on your photos. Okay, that's why we call them annotations, approximations, right? So once the project gets underway, you'll be able to demonstrate, or the contractors that you're dealing with will be able to help you decide exactly where to place in order to maximize the coverage from each of those devices. and pass it to Dov if you have any other thoughts to add here.
What about other equipment, Dov? Just let me insert this. What about other equipment? Seth brought up a good point about like the equipment closet, the monitoring locations. And then I know Dov and I had this question come up before. What about other items that are in your projects, one of your projects, that aren't necessarily going to be mounted to a wall or something like that? Can you kind of incorporate all of that
Sure.
into your response?
So most importantly, what you want to think about is devices, and what you want to annotate your photos with are devices that are visible to any visitor, and to obviously to members of your team, right? So those devices typically will include motion sensors, video cameras, intercoms, something that people interact with, use those devices, or those devices are observing some motion and movement around the facility. It's not required, as far as I know, in the EHP to demonstrate where your security equipment closet will be. This is just and the reason why I mentioned it during my presentation is because I feel that it's piece of your planning that certainly needs to be part of your discussions as a team, and that's something that you will have to decide on together with the contractors. But that bit of information, as far as the equipment closets are concerned, is not required, as far as I know, to be demonstrated on the EHP.
Yeah, I can add in there, right? Just like Ilya had mentioned before, you're not labeling out where all your cabling's going and conduit, right? It's visible items. So anything that would be installed externally. Personally, I've never seen anyone put the details in of their security closet. It definitely doesn't hurt. It makes more sense than the wiring behind the walls. So being that I've never seen anyone post it, that means no one's been not reimbursed because they didn't. But I think if you're gonna have a DVR put there, or the head end of your access control system, say here's gonna be our rack. What does it hurt? But they're really concerned about that stuff that could have that external impact on the building, on the environment. That's the goal of this document.
All right, I think we're it's 11:05, pushing 11:05. Dov, just want to mention one more thing. If you look at the last two questions there, people responded back relative to post holes and things like that. It's a little more technical. Do you want to try to answer these, or is this something we should do some research and get back on?
Yeah, we can jump in, and Ilya as well. The more technical, especially the external stuff, like a fence versus a camera on your internal wall, right, is going to take more attention than the external stuff is going to take more attention than the stuff inside your building. So they want to make sure that you're providing a little more details. Even more so if you really do have a historical requirement, a landmarks or environmental requirement, then they're really going to come back to you with more details. But if you look at the documentation they provide with the picture, you put your line around where you think the fence border will be. And what I really would do is work with your rep on that. Say, at this stage in the game, what other information for our fence do you need? And then from there, if they really require it, there's some general depth information. You can always go more than you need, and if you don't need it as deep for your fence, you're kind of safe. We're not digging 6 feet in here. I don't know if Ilya wants to add a little bit more, but that's where it will be more impactful if you do hit some sort of environmental or historical review.
Right. So, and the reason why I answered the way I did before is because I have not gone into EHP presentations from the clients I've worked with who got stuck with these specific questions. So I can tell you that even, having been a consultant for many years, I would want to wait till I've designed the job properly, right? And then moved on to the bids, and then interacted with potential contractors to decide what my depth of fence posting would be. So I would suggest, as a practitioner, that you might want to, take that language and send it back to your grant rep and say, at this stage in our EHP preparation, we're not ready to provide it because it requires further design. Is there any more guidance you can give me in order to satisfy what it is that you're looking for? They might tell you, just skip it. Or they might tell you, put TBD, right? Or they might say, pick a number, right? It will vary on the grant rep that you're interacting with. However, neither you nor the grant rep have sufficient technical knowledge to be able to say. And once you've said something, right, that possibly could lock you in. So I would humbly suggest that no, this is part of the design and interaction with the contractors, and as much as you can, I would avoid providing very specific responses to these very technical questions, because it's not within your purview, nor is it within the purview of the grant rep.
Basically, what this is an environmental and historical preservation review, so that if you're in a watershed area, that's when the fence posts may or may not become an issue. If you are a landmark or your building is of a certain age, that may become more of an issue. But again, let's return to the fact that your grant rep has the final word. And you go to them, you say, hi, we're going to put a fence here. We're, the next step is to get a contractor. That's where, this is what we have right now. And I've never heard of anyone needing to talk about the depth of the posting before.
And
so I'm not saying that some person who those of us who are in it know her quite well might come up with a new dimension request. This is something that we haven't seen before, and your building is not of a certain age, or you're not in a watershed or something like that. There's a camp on Staten Island in Terry's neck of the woods that really has difficulty doing anything because they're in a green belt. So they can't even put a fence post in. That's a separate issue, and we can help you work it out if you have a problem.
Well, first of all, thank you, everybody. And I think David closed it out perfectly there, that if for some reason your rep wants a lot more info, definitely move through don't let that detail slow you down. Develop your EHP. Everyone on this webinar, move forward. And hopefully on our next segment, I believe January 3rd, your questions will be much more real, much more to the finish line, and hopefully we'll be able to take them, do some live examples of some locations that we help, and obviously know your regional security director. And if you really do get into some sort of technical question like that, that's exactly where we can help, maybe a little bit more than today's session. But with that, thank you to everybody. Happy Hanukkah, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.
Thanks. Happy Hanukkah, everyone. Thank you for your time.
Happy Hanukkah.